kayo ay may sumbong o reklamo na gusto po ninyong paaksyonan sa inyong lugar, problema na nais niyo pong masolusyonan, mag-text sa 0915-415-1035 o mag-email sa responde@net25.com. Pwede rin kayo magpadala ng mensahe sa ating Facebook page at Net25TV. Hintayin po namin ang inyong mensahe para agad na marespondihan. Mapapanood nyo kami sa mga sumusunod na mga channels. Sabado, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi. Ito ang Responde, Mata ng Mamamayan.
Jimin, ano na nangyari dun sa puzzle na binigay ko sa'yo?
$98.93.
Hindi yun ang sagot.
Pwes, ano sagot dyan?
Ang sagot ay narito.
Sa unang pagkikita, masasagot ang isang misteryo.
Nasolve ko na po yung mystery.
Habang ang muling pagkikita,
Nice to meet you, ma'am. Kakalipat ko lang sa kabilang bahay.
mag-iiwan ng mas maraming misteryo.
Sino siya? Sino ang lalaking yun?
Malamang curious ka na kung sino ako. Babawiin na kita ngayon.
Kaninong anak yan?
Anak ko po siya.
Hindi mo siya anak.
A Place in the Sun.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's dance together sa Net25.
We're working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Good afternoon, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. On today's news, President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. has attributed his mild symptoms and quick recovery from COVID-19 to receiving his booster shot. Police officers and soldiers in Indonesia's restive eastern province, Papua, recovered the bodies of 10 people shot dead in an ambush that police attributed to rebels. After enjoying almost 2 months of being COVID-free, Cambodia today recorded its highest new case total for almost 3 months. And a 2-day meeting of finance ministers from the group of 20 major economies has ended Saturday in Indonesia without a joint communique after Russia's war in Ukraine divided the global forum. First in our news, President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. has attributed his mild symptoms and quick recovery from COVID-19 to receiving his booster shot. In the president's latest vlog titled BBM Vlog 219 Booster, Marcos gave updates on his health under his second bout of COVID and thanked those who wished for his quick recovery. Let's listen in.
Sa wakas ay tapos na ang aking isolation period. Sa awa ng Diyos ay wala na akong simptomas at mabuti-buti na ang aking pakiramdam. Unang-una ay gusto kong magpasalamat sa lahat ng nagparating ng kanilang pagbati at pangungumusta. Hindi ko na kayo ililista lahat.
Kapag nababasa ko ang mga mensahe ninyo, ay lalo naman akong lumalakas at lumalaban doon sa virus. Paman, nagpatuloy rin ang ating mga meeting at iba pang mga briefing nitong linggo kahit naka-isolate ako sa pamamagitan ng mga teleconferencing, yung mga Zoom, ay buti na lang ay may mga ganyang teknolohiya na ngayon. Isa ito sa mga innovation na pinahusay pa ng pandemya pero bahagi na rin talaga ng ating new normal. Kukunin ko na rin ang pagkakataong ito para ihayag muli ang importansya ng pagbabakuna at lalo na ang mga booster shot. Ito nga ang pangalawang COVID ko na. Pero ang tingin ko, kung hindi dahil sa vaccine at booster shot, ay siguradong mas malubha ang naging tama ko at ang aking pakiramdam. Dahil yung aking naging simptomas ay kaunting lagnat, kaunting pangangati ng lalamunan, pero hindi na talaga siya bumaba sa aking baga at naging komplikado. Kaya yan ang mensaheng pinagtutulungan namin lahat ngayon. Sa tulong ng DOH, ng DILG, ng DepEd, isusulong ang malawakang kampanya muli para sa pagbabakuna sa booster shot. Preparasyon na rin ito sa pagbabalik ng face-to-face classes at pagluwag ng iba pang mga safety protocols. Kung magiging matagumpay ang kampanyang ito, tuloy na yan. Hindi naman talaga kailangan isabatas pa ito dahil malaya pa rin tayong mamili para sa ating sariling kalusugan. Pero habang tumatagal, ay mas lumilinaw ang sinasabi ng siyensya. Ang mga datos at ang mga pag-aaral na ang pagbabakuna ay malaki ang naitutulong para sa ating kaligtasan mula sa COVID-19.
On July 8, to recall, Malacanang announced that Marcos had tested positive for COVID-19. The president was declared free from all symptoms on July 13th, the fifth day since he tested positive in an antigen COVID test. 2 days after being free from COVID symptoms, the president led the oath-taking of Ambassador Manuel Antonio Tihanki as the Philippine permanent representative to the World Trade Organization. Now, his latest public engagement officially ended his mandatory 7-day isolation after acquiring COVID-19. The Philippine government is beefing up its security measures to ensure that the First State of the Nation Address, or SONA, of President Marcos Jr. on July 25 will be peaceful and orderly. Authorities increased the number of state forces and force multipliers to secure Marcos's SONA from 15,000 to over 21,800. Now, they will guard the Batasang Pambansa in Quezon City and at least 30 border control points along the metro for the event, applying the same template utilized during the inauguration of Marcos in Manila on June 30. Of these, 16,964 officers will come from the NCR Police Office, 1,905 from police support units, and 2,974 from other agencies and volunteer groups. They will be equipped with motorcycles, mobile cars, drones, ambulances, fire trucks, and body-worn cameras. The police are ready to block and disperse groups who will stage protests in prohibited areas and those who will endanger public safety and disrupt activities. Protesters are only allowed in designated freedom parks like the Quezon City Memorial Circle. They may gather in some areas provided they secure permits from the Quezon City local government unit and adhere to guidelines of a peaceful assembly. The Quezon City Police District and the Metropolitan Manila Development Authority, or MMDA, will conduct clearing operations along Commonwealth Avenue, the main thoroughfare leading to the Sona Avenue. The government is encouraging Quezon City residents to cooperate with the initiative. The MMDA will also announce road rerouting plans so vehicles of Sona attendees can freely utilize portions of Commonwealth Avenue. Metro Manila residents are prohibited to use firearms outside their homes from July 22 to 27 as part of security measures for the President's SONA. In other news, police officers and soldiers in Indonesia's restive eastern province of Papua New Guinea recovered the bodies of 10 people shot dead in an ambush that police attributed to rebels. Take a look.
Telah terjadi kekerasan yang dilakukan oleh kelompok kriminal bersenjata terhadap warga masyarakat sipil di Kampung Logolat, Kabupaten Duga, ya, dengan cara menembak dan membacok para korban.
According to police, the shooting took place in a remote highland area when about 20 people, 3 armed with guns and others with sharp weapons, attacked a truck full of civilians. Some of the victims were traders transporting their goods to another village. The motive behind the attack remains unclear, but police and the army are now investigating exactly which separatists are responsible for the incident. Despite the demonstrations, Parliament passed a law in late June approving the division of Papua into 5 administrative regions, up from 2. Many in the region claim the court's decision did not involve local Papuans and believe it was a bid to strengthen Jakarta's role. The subsequent vote in favor of staying part of Indonesia, approved by the United Nations at the time, was widely considered a sham. Papua declared independence from the Dutch in 1961, but neighboring Indonesia took control 2 years later, promising a referendum. Papua's ongoing insurgency aims to gain independence from Indonesia, which took control of the former Dutch colony in the 1960s, and Saturday's attack was the deadliest since March, when 8 telecommunications workers were shot dead. In other news, a 2-day meeting of finance ministers from the group of 20 major economies has ended Saturday in Indonesia without a joint communique after Russia's war in Ukraine divided the global forum. In place of a formal communique would be a chair statement issued by Indonesia. There was consensus on most of the document, but 2 paragraphs would focus on members' differences regarding the war's impacts and how to respond. Let's listen in.
Most of the paragraph is actually supported by all members. Only 2 paragraphs which is we describing what is differences. So of course we are actually putting that within the context that on the one hand this is reflecting of all this member view. On the one hand there is still an issue that they cannot reconcile yet. But because they want to express their view regarding a certain issue that is, this is in particular related to the war, then that particular statement related to the war, reflecting there is still views which is different within the G20. So we just That's why I think this is the best result in which all member countries, including also the international organization, they are very much aware that the world needs even more and more collaboration. Because we also realize that almost all issues, no country, no matter where they are, where their position, how strong, how high, how rich, they cannot solve this problem alone. This challenging task is quite overwhelming. On the other hand, we also encourage by all strong support, unanimously each of the member country, when we talk bilaterally, they are all strongly support Indonesia presidency and the agenda. And they even expressing sympathy with the Indonesia situation.
Now, members also discussed sustainable finance, cryptocurrencies, and international taxation. Ms. Mulyani said progress was made on international tax rule changes that will set a global minimum corporate tax rate of 15% by 2024. Now, during talks on the Indonesian resort island of Bali, the finance chiefs also looked for solutions to food and energy crisis while accusing Russian technocrats of exacerbating the problems. Take a look.
We are faced with a combination of exogenous shocks that I don't think we have ever experienced. We had first a pandemic that brought the world economy to a standstill and pushed us into recession. The war in Ukraine creating a second exogenous shock on top of the first, and before the first is even over, and accelerating inflation that has started even before, while monetary policy has to tighten, fiscal policy needs to still buffer the most vulnerable parts of the population and businesses against the impact of this monetary policy tightening. In other words, for the two levers, they still need to work together, but need to work together in a very different manner. We lived through two shocks in 2 years. The way we have approached dealing with the climate crisis is guaranteed that we would have more shocks to come. I don't know when, I don't know how, I only know they'll be there. So we do need to think through the right policy mix for a world of more frequent and severe exogenous shocks.
Russia's unjustified war against Ukraine sent a shockwave through the global economy. Indeed, the fallout from this shockwave is an overarching focus of our discussions in Bali. Russia's war has propagated a commodity price shock as prices of food, fertilizer, and energy remain high, resulting in more people going hungry.
In today's other news, Secretary General of ASEAN, Dr. Lim Jock-Hoi, met with State Councilor and Foreign Minister of the People's Republic of China, His Excellency Wang Yi, at the ASEAN Secretariat. During his visit to the Secretariat, the State Councilor also delivered a policy speech touching upon ASEAN-China relations and open regionalism. Let's listen in.
So many friends at the ASEAN Secretariat after my last visit many years ago, and to meet so many friends, both old and new, at the ASEAN Secretariat in renewing our friendship and advancing cooperation through the Jakarta channel. In retrospect, the most encouraging development was that China-ASEAN relations have stayed ahead in many areas. China was the first to forge a strategic partnership with ASEAN, the first to join the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in Southeast Asia, the first to start an FTA negotiation with ASEAN, the first to give unequivocal support for ASEAN centrality and regional cooperation, and the first to publicly express its willingness to sign the protocol to the Southeast Asia nuclear weapon-free zone. My ASEAN colleagues have told me that among ASEAN's dialogue partners, China has the most vibrant and productive ties with ASEAN. Asia is now standing at a new historical starting point and facing unprecedented development opportunities. We must also be aware that the world today is not peaceful. There are two completely different trends concerning the future of Asia. One advocates open regionalism, true multilateralism, a development-first approach, and mutually beneficial cooperation. It aims to help countries in the region emerge from the pandemic and achieve all-round development as soon as possible. The other pursues a relapse into the obsolete Cold War mentality and closed group politics, and classifies countries in the region based on their values. It attempts to divide the regional economy into different blocks and even apply the NATO approach to Asia-Pacific security. The choice we make today determines where the path will take us from now on. Openness or isolation, cooperation or confrontation, solidarity or division, progress or regression. We need to always uphold the concept of peaceful coexistence. In history, China lived in harmony with Southeast Asian countries and other neighbors, living touching stories of good neighborliness and enduring friendship. In the 1950s, we together advocated the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, under which all countries enjoy rights to peace, regardless of their size and strength. Over the past half century, the region has developed the ASEAN way, or an Asian way, underpinned by major principles such as mutual respect, consensus building, and accommodating the comfort levels of all parties.
In other news, Trade Secretary Alfredo Pascual said the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, is a priority of the Marcos administration, which deems it crucial in efforts to attract investments. According to a Business Mirror report, the trade chief pointed out that without these free trade agreements and RCEP, the Philippines would not be an attractive location for such types of export-oriented enterprises. Let's listen in.
DTI will continue to push for the immediate ratification of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or RCEP, and other trade agreements. With only 10 FTAs, the Philippines has the least number of FTAs among the ASEAN 6 countries. Singapore signed 27 FTAs, Malaysia 17, Thailand 15, Indonesia 15, Vietnam 15. These agreements will diversify the country's exports in terms of products and services and country destinations, and enhance the country's attractiveness to foreign investments. Most foreign investments in China, for instance, are export-oriented industries. They are from big multinationals having transferred their production facilities to China and using China as a production place. Without FTAs and RCEP, the Philippines would not be an attractive location for such types of export-oriented enterprises.
Now, RCEP is a free trade agreement among ASEAN countries and their trading partners Australia, China, Japan, New Zealand, and South Korea. Touted as the world's largest trade pact, RCEP represents 30% of the global gross domestic product, or $26.2 trillion. It entered into force on January 1 this year. Now, China on Sunday said it is negotiating with the Philippines over the funding of some infrastructure projects after a Philippine transport official bared that these were deemed withdrawn due to Beijing's inaction on funding requests by the previous administration. The Chinese embassy issued the clarification after Transport Undersecretary for Railways Cesar Chavez revealed that the Philippines scrapped its loan applications for 3 big-ticket railways: the Philippine National Railways Bicol Project, Subic-Clark Railway Project, and the first phase of the Mindanao Railway Project, due to Beijing's unresponsiveness to its loan application since 2019. Chavez earlier said President Bongbong Marcos Jr. is looking at renegotiating the loans with Beijing or negotiating with other countries. In a statement, the Chinese embassy did not directly mention the funding withdrawal, but vowed to tap its own advantage and support the Philippines to improve its infrastructure. The embassy said China is open for technical discussions over our G2G, or government-to-government projects, and is ready to carry out our cooperation forward in close communication with the Philippines' new administration. Mr. Chavez said China's funding commitment for the railway projects was deemed canceled, as China has been unresponsive to the Philippine government's loan application since 2019. He said the Chinese bank was asking for 3% interest on the loans, much higher than the 0.1% rate charged by Japan.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Good news sa lahat ng mahilig magluto at kumain.
May bago at katakam-takam na cooking show dito lamang sa Net25. Ako si Patty Daza.
Ako naman si Sandy Daza.
Samahan niyo kaming magpinsan dito sa Lutong Daza.
Bukod sa masarap at abot kaya na recipes, masarap ang kwentuhan at halakhakan dito.
At syempre, laging may special celebrity guest. Kainan na! Kita-kits!
Lutong Daza
sa Net25.
Ito ang Net25 Primetime News. Matatag. Matapang. Matapat kasama sina Alex Santos, Emma Tiglao at Vic De Leon Lima. Mata ng Agila. Lunes hanggang Biyernes, alas 6 ng gabi sa Net25.
Kada umaga, sarap ng umaga, magkakasama. Kada umaga, sarap ng umaga, magkakasama.
Welcome back. Stocks rose in Asia today following a rally on Wall Street in response to data indicating U.S. consumers remained resilient to surging inflation and higher interest rates, easing concerns about a possible recession. Speculations that Saudi Arabia will lift oil production after President Joe Biden's visit last week also provided some relief as crude prices, a key driver of inflation in recent months, dropped. Still, investors continue to fret over the economic outlook, with Russia's war in Ukraine showing no signs of ending and China locks down cities to fight a new COVID flare-up and central banks quickly tighten monetary policy. In early trade, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Sydney, Seoul, Singapore, Taipei, Jakarta, and Wellington were all up. Tokyo was closed for a holiday. However, uncertainty remains rife on trading floors with a new spike in COVID cases in China, causing concern that officials will impose fresh lockdowns in major cities, including Shanghai and Beijing. A 2-month shutdown in Shanghai earlier this year hammered the world's #2 economy and severely hit global supply chains. Lanzhou, the capital of northwestern Gansu province, has ordered its 4.4 million residents to stay home, while a county in Anhui province went into lockdown from Friday. In a related news, Macau is set to begin another working week of partial lockdown after the city extended the closure of its casinos and non-essential businesses to try and eradicate its worst coronavirus outbreak yet. Authorities had announced a week of static management starting June 11 after recording more than 1,500 infections in the previous 3 weeks despite multiple rounds of compulsory mass testing of the city's population. On Saturday, the government announced that the static management period would be extended through Friday. All residents have to stay home except to go shopping for daily necessities and to get tested for the virus, with rule breakers facing up to 2 years in jail. Some public services and businesses, such as supermarkets and pharmacies, are allowed to stay open. But casinos, which in normal times account for around 80% of government revenue, need to keep their doors closed. The restrictions had been due to lift on Monday, but cases have continued to climb, with the Macau government saying Sunday there had been 1,733 cases recorded since the start of the outbreak. Daily case numbers are comparatively small by global standards, but authorities have moved quickly to stamp out transmission as they adhere to mainland China's strict zero-COVID policy, and thousands of Filipinos have been affected by this shutdown. In other news, Go Negosyo founder Joey Concepcion is asking the Department of Health Officer in Charge, or OIC Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere, to reform the Health Technical Assessment Council, or HTAC, to accelerate the COVID booster vaccinations in the country. Let's listen in.
Private sector may partnership kami with the government. Kami na unang pumasok dito ng AstraZeneca vaccines, no? At si Secretary Galvez, he helped us put the tripartite agreement, and bumili kami ng maraming vaccines, no, for the primary doses and the booster doses as well, no. At alam naman natin, we are in a crisis and the sense of urgency must be there. So okay naman tayo for the primary doses, walang problema. Approve lahat ang pag-execute natin, seamless. Pero dito pagdating sa first booster shot, no, may konting delay, no, pero what we are also suggesting is that and wala naman masyadong problema sa first booster kasi halos lahat ng mga ages pwedeng kumuha ng first booster, pero dito sa succeeding second booster, isang problema rin yan kasi pinili na namin yung mga bakuna para sa kanila, no, at ang first booster halos sa amin kasi AstraZeneca ang unang dumating dito. By now, we're already at the 6th month, no, from the first booster shot. At we requested that they bring down the age of the second booster shot to 50 years old, no? At ginagawa na rin yan sa Amerika, no? At I'm told that the second booster shot is being reviewed now in America and other countries to be given to everyone, no? So yun ang we have been appealing to HTAC. Sana ma-approve na yan. It's right now it's only approved. The second booster is only approved for 60 years and above. Well, one of the recommendations to the president is basically, aside from suggesting to change the alert levels to the stoplight, which is green, yellow, and red, is to also incentivize the public, no? So, if we want to lift the use of or make outdoor mask optional, ang suggestion namin is right now, 70% of the Filipinos have taken their primary doses. So, yung objective natin is to hit at least 70% of that 70% to take the booster shot. So, if we're able to do that, it's still a tall order, no? Kasi medyo ang layo natin, nasa 20%, no? Tayo. To go up to 70%, it's another 50% that we have to attain, no? Now, if we are able to do that, it's maybe the provinces, the cities, or the regions, then that's the time that maybe we can make outdoor mask optional once we have achieved that objective. So, ibig sabihin ng 70% of that 70%, basically attaining at least 50%, no, of the eligible to be boosted.
Meanwhile, after enjoying almost 2 months of being COVID-free, Cambodia today recorded its highest new case total for almost 3 months. Today's official daily new COVID case total diagnosed by PCR test was 22, bringing the COVID case total to 136,477 cases. This is the highest new case total since April 23rd and shows the gradual increase in cases after the kingdom had enjoyed almost 2 months of being COVID-free. Cambodia announced 0 new deaths, bringing the total to 3,056 direct deaths from COVID in Cambodia. The kingdom also recorded 22 new community and 0 new imported cases of the new variant. There are now 119 active COVID cases diagnosed again by PCR test in the kingdom. In response to the growing amount of cases, the royal government has asked all COVID-19 positive people who are receiving treatment in their own homes to strictly abide by the Ministry of Health's SOP or Standard Operating Procedures. The Department of Foreign Affairs on Saturday raised Alert Level 2 for Filipinos in Sri Lanka due to the security situation in that country. But they clarified that there is no evacuation plan just yet. The department emphasized that there are no plans yet to evacuate Filipinos from Sri Lanka at this time. Based on its latest data, there are more than 500 Filipinos in Sri Lanka. Alert Level 2 is issued when there are, quote, real threats to life, security, and property of Filipinos arising from an internal disturbance or external threat to the host country. Under this classification, there will be no new deployment of overseas Filipino workers to Sri Lanka, and only those with existing employment contracts are allowed to return to the country. The advisory came days after thousands of protesters stormed the official residence of former Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who had been blamed for the spiraling economic crisis in the country. The DFA said no Filipino has so far been reported injured due to the mass protests there. In a related story, the resignation of Sri Lanka's President Gotabaya Rajapaksa comes after months of protests blaming his government for the mismanagement of the island nation's economy with a foreign exchange crisis leading to the severe hardships for its 22 million people. Inflation is rampant. The country has nearly exhausted its already scarce supplies of petrol, with the government ordering the closure of non-essential offices and schools to reduce commuting and save fuel. How did it get there? Let's take a look.
An unexpected pool party at Sri Lanka's presidential palace. But President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was not hosting. He fled the Colombo residence just minutes before tens of thousands of protesters overran it on July 9th. After initially resisting the people's call, Rajapaksa resigned shortly after arriving in Singapore, having fled Sri Lanka.
ගරු ජනාධිපති ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ මැතිතුමා විසින් එවන ලද ඉල්ලා අස්වීමේ ලිපිය මා වෙත ලැබී ඇත.
The dramatic events are the culmination of months of protests. Sri Lankans are enraged by the economic crisis and the Rajapaksa clan's incompetence and alleged corruption. The South Asian nation is facing hyperinflation and critical shortages of essentials like food, fuel, and medicine. But how exactly did Sri Lanka get here? '73-year-old Gotabaya became president in 2019, a member of a clan that has dominated politics in the country for decades. Brother Mahinda has served as both president and prime minister before quitting politics just a couple of months ago amid the unrest. Various members of their family were given positions in government. The Rajapaksas have been accused of chronic mismanagement of the country's finances and corruption over the years. Sri Lankans have endured months of medicine and food shortages, electricity blackouts. Fuel stations have run out of petrol and diesel.
How many people gathered here, they are shouting we don't have fuel here, we don't have gas here. Now the medical supplies are very low and the food very low.
Sri Lanka defaulted on its $51 billion foreign debt in April and has been in talks with the IMF for a possible bailout for months. The country is now also facing hyperinflation. Many goods, if they can be found, have become unaffordable for most. The UN says 3/4 of the population have reduced their food intake as a result.
நல்ல தலைவனை கொண்டு வந்தோம் நினைச்சு கொண்டு வந்தோம் நல்ல தலைவன் அவன் பார்த்தானா இப்படி கீழ் சாதித்தனமான வேலைகளை செஞ்சுட்டு இப்படி நாசமான போன காரியங்களை செஞ்சுட்டு நாட்டு மக்களே பசியில போட்டுக்கிறான் அவனோடு ஊர்படுவானுங்களா இனி ஒரு நல்ல ஒரு தலைவன் கிடைக்க மாட்டானா எங்களுக்கு அப்படின்ற ஏக்கம் இருக்குது மேடம்
சாப்பாடு சரி கஷ்டம் ஒரு நேரம் சாப்பிட்டு ஒரு நேரத்தில் எல்லாம் பசியில் இருக்கிறோம் யாரை போயிட்டு கேட்குறது ஒரு நேரம் சாப்பிட்டு இப்போ காலையில் இருந்து நாங்கள் ஒன்றும் சாப்பிட இல்லை யார் தர போகிற எந்த அரசாங்கத்தில் தர்றாங்க
Protests erupted in April 2022. Sri Lankans defied nationwide curfews under a state of emergency.
இளைஞர்கள் ஊடகவியலாளர்கள் இது மட்டுமல்லாமல் விவசாயிகள் எல்லா துறையினரும் இன்றைக்கு நாங்கள் பாதைகளில் வீதிகளில் இறங்கி நாங்கள் இந்த அரசாங்கத்திற்கு எதிராக குரல் எழுப்புவது வேறொன்றும் இல்லை எங்களுக்கு ஜனநாயகம் முக்கியம் அதே போல எங்களுடைய நாட்டில் இருக்கிற மனிதர்கள் அனைவரும் தங்களுடைய தன்னிறைவான உணவை பெற்றுக்கொள்ள வேண்டிய அவசியம் இருக்கின்றது அதே போல அவருடைய உரிமைகளை வென்றெடுக்க வேண்டிய அவசியம் இருக்கிறது.
People were killed and injured.
Want the whole Rajapaksa clan out because they are so corrupt. They have been eating into Sri Lanka like a caterpillar eating into some fruit or a leaf.
Protesters are becoming stronger. So in time to come, I think they have to fall in line. I mean, they can't go on because they already, people got frustrated, the posters have got frustrated, the general public got frustrated. So obviously they have to leave. There is no other way.
Gotabai's resignation has been accepted by the parliament. He emailed his notice from Singapore where he fled to seek refuge. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe has been sworn in as acting president, but many of the demonstrators see him as complicit and also want him to go. Parliament will meet in mid-July to elect an MP to succeed Rajapaksa for the rest of his term.
In today's other news, UN agencies, WHO and UNICEF said that for the second year in a row, because of the COVID-19 tests, tens of millions of children have missed out on key vaccines for preventable diseases. New data on global immunization coverage published by the WHO and the UN Children's Fund revealed that 2021 saw the largest sustained decline in childhood vaccinations in nearly 30 years. Take a look.
This is the largest sustained decline in childhood vaccination in approximately 30 years. And the proportion of children who received the third dose of vaccines that contain diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, which is against whooping cough, this is our marker for immunization coverage both within and across countries. In 2021, there were 25 million children who missed out on one or more doses of their DTP containing vaccines through routine immunization services. This threatens increased outbreaks, deaths, and for some who survived the illnesses that they otherwise wouldn't have gotten, lifelong consequences. But the pandemic is not over. We need to both sustain and maintain momentum on COVID-19 population immunity through vaccination, but it also means that we have to assure that vaccination for measles and HPV and pneumonia and diarrhea gets back on track urgently. That means catching up millions of children who have missed their vaccines in 2020 and 2021. It also means recovering immunization programs and sustaining that trajectory of essential immunization.
And the alarm is that we are witnessing the largest continued drop in vaccination in a generation. At UNICEF, we are deeply concerned about what this backsliding means for children, especially in those children who live in low and middle income countries, given that it comes with dire consequences. Unfortunately, not only did we not see a recovery, we in fact lost even more ground. And we are already seeing the consequences of this. Inadequate coverage levels have resulted in avoidable outbreaks of diseases such as measles and polio in the past 12 months period.
The UN Children's Fund also expressed deep concern about the potentially dire consequences for malnourished children in lower and middle income countries whose immune systems had been weakened by conflict, climate shocks, COVID, and now the global food and fuel crisis sparked by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Ethiopia, India, Indonesia, Nigeria, and the Philippines recorded the highest numbers of zero-dose children. The detailed datasets can be accessed on the UNICEF and WHO websites. And today's other news, as ASEAN increases its engagement in cross-border business to consumer trade, maintaining consumer confidence has become even more critical to the ASEAN regional economy. As a response, the ASEAN Committee on Consumer Protection has developed the ASEAN Online Consumer Complaint Function to address consumer cross-border disputes involving the purchase of products from businesses in ASEAN member states and even online. Let's take a look.
As consumers, we have the right to complain and seek compensation when we experience harm or loss. This could be caused by goods and services that do not fulfill certain quality standards or expectations. For example, some goods and services may not match their description or are otherwise not satisfactory in quality. When this happens, consumers can get redress by filing a complaint and asking for a refund or some other form of compensation from the business. First, consumers can contact the business, who should have a customer service or help desk to deal with complaints. If the complaint cannot be resolved, they can consult with the consumer protection agencies or associations for guidance on who to approach. There are different institutions that can help settle consumer complaints, which can be reached both online and offline. These include sectoral authorities or regulators and alternative dispute resolution bodies. These institutions can assist in mediating the dispute or discipline the business if consumer protection laws have been breached. As a last resort, the consumers may bring their case to the court. For this, they may need support from a legal professional or entity. Information about authorities in charge of consumer protection in ASEAN can be found on the website of the ASEAN Committee on Consumer Protection, or the ACCP. Effective mechanisms for dispute resolution safeguard the interests and rights of consumers in ASEAN. This way, they can benefit from better and safer goods and services.
Meanwhile, the ASEAN Framework on Anticipatory Action in Disaster Management aims to ensure that early warnings are reliably translated into effective anticipatory action to reduce the negative impacts of disasters across the region. Watch this.
ASEAN is bearing the brunt of disasters more than any other regions. With climate change, both extreme and slow onset natural disasters are hitting harder and more often. As these growing threats add to other social, environmental, and economic pressures, innovative solutions to disaster risk management are in high demand, with less focus on responding to and recovering after disasters, and more focus on preventing and mitigating the impacts of climate hazards, as well as protecting lives and livelihoods. As the scale and frequency of climate-related disasters are only set to increase, we must act and move forward together. The ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response Work Program for 2021 to 2025 recognizes that integrating anticipatory action is necessary to strengthen disaster risk reduction and management in the region. What does the future of anticipatory action look like at ASEAN? This year, ASEAN developed the Anticipatory Action Framework in Disaster Management, led by the ASEAN Committee on Disaster Management, ACDM, with the support from various sectoral bodies, centers, and partners. The framework defines anticipatory action as a set of interventions that are carried out when a hazard poses imminent danger based on a forecast, early warning, or pre-disaster risk analysis. Anticipatory actions are taken by individuals and organizations before an anticipated disaster to mitigate its impact on people, assets, and infrastructure likely to be affected. Setting up anticipatory action systems and implementation has 3 building blocks at its core. These include 1. Risk information, forecasting, and early warning systems. 2. Planning, operations, and delivery. And 3. Pre-arranged finance. To translate words into action, the framework further sets out an action plan for 2021 to 2025. This focuses on the alignment of policy, strengthening foundations to enable an environment for anticipatory action, and setting up regional collaboration mechanisms. By adopting the framework, the ASEAN region is committed to protecting and equipping at-risk populations before disaster strikes, minimizing the impacts, protecting livelihoods, and saving lives.
Meanwhile, the Philippine Marine Corps and the U.S. Marine Corps will conduct specialized helicopter drills from July 18th to the 22nd. PMC spokesperson Major Emery Torres, in a statement Sunday night, said these exercises are the second part of the Marine Aviation Support Activity, or MASA, 2022. The first phase of the exercises took place from June 6 to 17. The PMC and the USMC are expected to execute and refine their tactics, techniques, and procedures for interoperability. The first part of MASA 2022 took place in Palawan and included a combined joint forward arming and refueling demonstration and a lecture on unmanned air systems operations. 4 C-17 transport aircraft of the U.S. Air Force arrived in Lawag City on June 6, along with the U.S. C-130 cargo plane that landed on June 7, carrying personnel and equipment for the second leg of the exercise from July 18 to the 22nd. In today's other news, Jennifer Cupcho and Lizette Salas combined for a 9-under par 61 on Saturday to win the LPGA Great Lakes Bay Invitational Team event by 5 strokes. The U.S. duo started the day with a 4-shot lead and didn't put or didn't put a foot wrong in the 4-ball or best ball final round at Midland Country Club in Michigan. Their 26 under par total put them 5 in front of Finland's Matilda Castren and Malaysian Kelly Tan, who grabbed solo second on 21 under par with Castren's birdie at the 18th to cap an 8 under par 62. And that saw them edge ahead of American Stacey Lewis and Mexico's Maria Fassi, who roared up the leaderboard with an 11 under par 59 but settled for third on 20 under 260. And Indonesia's Anthony Ginting ended his 2-year title drought by beating Japan's Kodai Naraoka 23-21, 21-17 in the men's singles final to win the Singapore Badminton Open. After taking down world champion Law Kian Yu in the semifinal, Ginting, the world number 6, continued to display the same attacking style to end the giant-slaying run of Naraoka. The world number 43's passage to the final saw him stun world number 8 Jonathan Christie, India's H.S. Pranoy, and China's Zhao Junpeng, who were all ranked higher than him. Naraoka came out strongly in the second game by taking the lead on 5 occasions. But Ginting's ferocious attacks and deceptive net play saw him pull ahead of 17-17 to eventually win the second game 21-17. And that is the latest news on today's ASEAN in Focus. Thank you for joining us here today. This is Alma Angeles. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times.